Good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. Tonight, brevity, simplicity, and hope. Those three things will get us to the promised land, I hope, because the average person doesn't have an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to listen to a long explanation, a long exposition of how federal financing works. But tonight, we're going to take a quick shot at what brevity, simplicity, hope looks like in a modern monetary world. So the bottom line is that most of us have heard for the last, forever, that the United States government is broke, that we can't do nice things, and ultimately that we're in debt through the gills. You hear people say that we're going to be passing on debt to our grandchildren. You hear people saying that China owns us. You hear people saying that the Federal Reserve is a private bank and that we're in debt to the Jews and we're in debt to the Rothschilds and all manner of stories and fibs and tales from the fire pit. But what if it were a lot more simple than that? What if it didn't require some sort of a brain of craziness to come up with some sleuthy idea when reality is so much better, so much easier, and so much more hopeful? So we're going to talk quickly about how modern monetary theory is the linchpin to satisfying the progressive agenda, to satisfying the needs of the people, and to providing real and genuine hope. The first thing is, let's get rid of the taxation deal for a second. Taxes are a very, very important component of any modern fiat currency. Any fiat currency, any currency in general, in order to have it accepted, needs to have a debt tied to it. It has to have something to compel and draw that currency to be used. So in a federal situation like the fiat currency that the United States government has, Japan has, Australia has, friggin' Canada, Russia, the UK, they have a tax-driven economy. In other words, they impose a tax not to pay for things because they create the money with keystrokes out of thin air. No, they impose a tax to make it so that you need that currency. In other words, that currency will never go out. It'll never debunk. It'll never go the way of the dodo bird. It's going to stay in need because they tax in it, and you must pay your tax liability in that government's unit of account. In the United States, that is the U.S. dollar, okay? It's not the Federal Reserve dollar. It's not some Chinese yuan. It's not the Japanese yen. It's not the Australian dollar, not the Canadian dollar, and not a Bitcoin. Only the United States dollar can be redeemed to pay your taxes. You cannot pay your taxes in gold. You cannot pay your taxes in oil. You cannot pay your taxes in pearls. You cannot pay your taxes in Bitcoin. You cannot pay your taxes in love kisses or even emojis. You can only pay your taxes in U.S. dollars. That is what gives it its value, and that also is the tool that we use to be able to take heat out of the economy and cool it off or make the economy flourish. It is used as a brake or a gas pedal. Pushing taxes one way or the other can slow an economy or it can speed an economy up depending on the circumstances. The next thing we need to know is that the federal government is the owner of the patent of the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is a law. It's the unit of account for the United States. Okay? This is not something that some other person can create. Article 1, Section 8 of your U.S. Constitution tells you clearly that the U.S. government owns this. Period. Full stop. End of story. That's all you need to know. Anything beyond that is somebody drinking at a bar telling you a story. No need to listen any further. The next thing is, what about this crazy debt? What about all this debt we have, right? Well, we don't really have debt like you and I have it, do we? The federal government sells bonds. It sells these things with existing U.S. dollars to buy them. So China may buy U.S. bonds. Japan may buy U.S. bonds. Someone else may buy U.S. bonds. The bottom line is that what they do is they sell these bonds as a means of defending a positive interest rate at the Fed, because they target an interest rate for a variety of reasons. Number one is to keep unemployment at a certain level, to drive the cost of goods sold, and to make sure that people get their basic income, those rich suckers at the top that buy these treasury bonds, right? That's what that interest is for. But it's not paid for by you and I. You and I don't pay that. That comes from keystrokes. So in other words, every single dollar of this debt is simply the amount of dollars, the net money supply, as Warren Mosler would say, that has yet to be taxed. Every dollar in this debt pool is the sum total of all the dollars that have yet to be taxed. So in other words, if you reduce the debt, you reduce all the money that we have at our disposal. Pretty stupid, right? Absolutely. So why do you think people like Sarah Palin and all these other fools would like to reduce the debt? You'll have to ask them. It's brain dead thinking. It's ridiculous. Why do you think they want to reduce the deficit? The deficit is simply the difference between taxing and spending. So if you reduce the deficit, what you in effect do is reduce the income of regular Americans. You're not reducing the deficit in terms of doing something noble. You're simply taking money out of the economy. But what about those tax dollars again? Let's talk about that. Do taxes actually pay for goods and services? Absolutely not. When the dollar is spent into existence by Congress, that dollar takes on its first and only spend by the government. It's spent exactly one time by the government. When it makes its way back to the government as a tax, it has subsequently served its purpose and it is deleted, flushed, gone, finite. Dollars spent into the economy through Congress, dollars taxed out of the economy through Congress. Interesting stuff, right? Should be pretty easy to understand. It's a circuit. This isn't rocket scientist stuff. I mean, anybody could say this. Anybody can understand this. You don't need to be an economist to get this. You don't need to be the graduate of some Ivy League school to get this. You can be an activist that wants to see a new deal implemented. And you can be somebody that's tired of hearing people lie and say the United States government is broke. How can a government be broke on debt denominated in its own currency that it creates by keystrokes, that is backed simply by taxation? Ask yourself these questions next time you see someone say something remarkably uninspiring, let's say, about MMT being wrong, about it being a cult, about it being stupid, about it being a fraud. Ask them to answer these questions. If they cannot do it, you already know you're in the presence of someone who should never be listened to for any reason under the sun. Their ignorance should never be accepted as knowledge. It's fake knowledge, and it is sidelining the progressive movement. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives, hoping you learned something today. Thank you all very much. Have a great night. Joy Marie Mann will be on live here shortly with Yane Endigo. Join us then at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a great day, everyone. And if you can, please sign up to be a monthly donor at our Patreon account. The links are on our page. And if you can't, please, if you'd like to volunteer and help us, sign up. We could use everybody's help. Have a great night, everybody. Goodbye.